Hi everyone, long time no chat here, but lots been going on. We'll get into that another day. But today, exciting stuff. We are going to do video 1 for just the intro, just a little dabble into the series that I'm going to be doing about rabbit genetics. So we're going to be talking about, throughout this series, we'll be talking about color patterns, what you could get from your possible breedings, how to tell, how to be able to read your pedigrees, how to be able to what you're looking for in good quality stock, your colors, pelts. We're going to be talking about all of those things. So we're just going to cover just a little bit today. We're going to touch on just some of the possible genes. We're going to do a sample I drew up of a little grid so you can try to see what you would get from that litter, just the basic things. So I made notes, so I made a good bit of notes, because sometimes I get talking to you guys and then I get off somewhere and I forget key information sometimes. We don't want that to happen, especially because there's so much that we're going to pack into this. I'm not sure how many parts are going to be into this series. I want, in the comments, I want to hear your questions. What do you want answered? What kind of rabbits do you have? What are your goals? All of those kind of things, and we can be answering those as we progress through the series. So, to start, there are 10, I know, that is a lot, color genes. However, we are going to be focusing on the first 5, and that would be A, B, C, D, and the E's. Okay? So that's what we're going to be focusing on. A stands for agouti, and an agouti rabbit is typically what you can see on a wild rabbit, and we'll get to that characteristic here in just a minute. So agouti basically is your pattern, or lack thereof, on the hair shaft. B would stand for black, or which would be dominant, or your lowercase b, meaning recessive, would stand for chocolate, aka brown. Okay, so that is going to be more of your self-coloring, and we will also get into that here in a minute. C will be for complete color. So that is what's going to be your shaded or albino. That's what's going to determine all of those for you. Albino being just lack of color, and that rabbit having the recessive, as the red-eyed white. Because white is not a color, it is actually just the absence of color in rabbits. D is going to be the if it is going to be a dense color or a dilute, and that's just basically the vibrancy. So that's what's going to control that. And then you'll have your E, which is E for extension, and that is going to be your extension of color. How far does the color go up a single hair shaft? And that's how you can get your brokens. So some, the hair made it all the way up, some it did not, and you can get different broken patterns. That's where that comes from. The key thing to remember here, though, also, is that there's only actually 2, which is very shocking because of how many colors there are for rabbits. There's only 2 color pigments possible. There is yellow, or there is brown. It's a dark brown at that. The only other thing, like I said, would be the absence of color. So it just wouldn't be there at all. Your red-eyed whites, your albinos. Any other color is just going to be a combination or lack thereof of everything combined. You'll start to get into what's dominant, what's recessive, and go all the way A through, there's 10, but it gets a little funky and it goes into W. That's farther in the series for sure. And then the color pigment's also going to be different on a long-haired rabbit and a short-haired rabbit. A short-haired rabbit, like the Rex, will have very vibrant colors. Rex have 19 recognizable colors, showable colors, and you can look those up on the ARBA website, and I will be periodically popping up pictures, examples. There will also be some things at the end of this video, and we will always do a little recap in the next series about the previous video so that we can kind of keep track. So feel free to keep checking back to this video anytime that you need it. The longer the hair, the more pale the color would appear. So when you have your more longer haired rabbits, like your lion heads, your Angoras, their hair fibers are going to be a little bit different. Wild rabbits, like I said, are agouti. That would be towards their skin is going to be gray, more so on the hair fiber. It's going to progress more so into a yellow, and then into a black, and then into absence. So a rabbit that is agouti, like the wild rabbits, you'll notice that on their underside is white, like on their underside, like by their nose, their inner ears, their tails. That is how you can tell that rabbit is agouti. We also have tan and self, like I said we would talk about. Agouti is one of the color patterns. It is the main color pattern. It is the A, and it is typically the most dominant. Self means, like a self color is easy to remember because it is solid colors. So if a black is a self color, you're all black. Chocolate being a self color, all chocolate, and then as well as violet. Another another term in the domestic rabbits for agouti would be all the rabbits you see labeled as chestnut. That will give you also your agouti. Then we have our third color pattern. So 5 color genes we're going to touch on, 10 total, but only 3 color patterns and only 2 pigments. Are you with me so far? If you have questions, drop them in the comment section while you're thinking of them, and then I will be able to get those questions answered and be able to answer those in video form if needed for the next section. Tan is your next color pattern. A tan and an agouti. This is the difference. So an agouti we just talked about is going to have that white underneath. The tan is going to have silvering, where the agouti would have white. The difference being tan is going to be a solid color on the top, and the agouti will have that different hair fibers on the top of their bodies and have different colors throughout that same follicle. Self also goes into some fun ones like smoke pearl and like tortoise. Those would be examples of the self. And another example of, say, tan would be your port otter, your sable. It would have those sable point patterns, and blue. Opal, lynx, and the frosted pearl, those ones would be another example, along with chestnut, for your agouti. So I have made a little chart here, and you see A, B, C, D, E's at the top, and that would be for your agouti, which that's your most dominant typically. Your black and brown for yourself. This is for your color complete. D, remember, that is about how our vibrancy of color, and then E would be for our extension of color. So let's just take an example, and I'll pop up on the screen as we go through some examples of rabbits that are these things so that you can then have a visual. So for A, we would have your standard agouti, and I will pop up. And then you would have your AT, more recessive, with your tan otter. And then you would have your recessive A agouti self. For B, you would have black being your dominant and lowercase b being recessive for brown chocolate. So for your color complete, when you get a full dominant C, that is going to be a full color. So let's say a self black would be your full color. It's fully black. It's a full self black. If you had, let's say, CHD, don't worry, we'll get into all of this. But that would be your dark chinchillas. I'll put those up there. Because in your chinchilla would be for your agouti pattern. And then like a CHI, that would be your light chinchilla, your sable, and I'll pop a picture up here. And then you have a CH, which that's going to be your Californians, your Himalayans. So you can see how if you have a Himalayan that is a recessive CH bred to a self-dominant black, you're going to be able to know what your outcome on that is likely going to be with the table that I'm going to show you next. And then you have just the C recessive, and that would be the absence of color. That would be your color pattern completely recessive, and that would be if you have two recessive parents breeding, or you have a recessive gene in there and the kit picks it up, that's giving you your red-eyed white. So then you have your dense and your dilute. We talked about that. So that's just the vibrancy of color. I'm not going to put up any impromptus there. Your extension, if it was dominant and recessive for extension, that's how you get broken. And if it was both dominants, that's how you get Charlie, which would be your I got this Arba book here for say your checker giant. So on a normal extension, those E's are what's going to be like your Japanese harlequins. It's just about how, and steels, that's about how the hair fiber, the color extends on the fiber. So E for extension, extends. D for density, is it more dense or less dense? C for color complete, complete color, absence of color, and then your dominant A, B for agouti and self. Okay, so now we are going to view this chart, and this is a Punnett Square. I'm sure you've used them in school at some point, and that is, we're going to just focus on litter 1, and that is where you put the dam on one side, the sire on another, and that will be your traits you can fill in the square to get the odds of what your kits will be based on the genetics of your parents. So I put litter 1 and litter 2 on here because I did them separately so that we could figure out what we would learn from both of them because they are different. So we're going to focus on number 1, and so that is both parents, as you can see, have a dominant and a recessive B. So they are heterozygous. And that means that they have two different genes. And if they were like both dominant BB or both recessive BB, they would be homeozygous. So that means, so on this, it's BB. So that is both going to be dominant. And so we're going to put capital BB here in this square. And we'll just keep matching. So this would be capital B, lowercase b. And then down here, you would have capital B, lowercase b. And then over here, you would have lowercase b and lowercase b, because lowercase and lowercase. So this is per kit. So this is a litter. So that means a quarter of your litter, 2/4, 3/4. So let's see, what does that chart tell us? You've got your genetics. You know what your parents are. What can you do with it? So you know now that the probability, which rabbits on average have about 8 in a litter. So you know, in your litter, you can expect probably a quarter of them to have this recessive and be brown chocolate in this case. You can expect 2/4 of them, half, to be heterozygous, like the parents, that could produce either or. And then a quarter would be homeozygous, meaning they share the exact same. And if you had a small litter, it is probable that you could have an all black litter. That's totally probable. And black is dominant. So black will show even on a chocolate rabbit. The only way to know is if you actually test breed your rabbits. There's no way to know who's hetero and who's homeo unless you're actually litter testing them consistently to see what they're throwing. And having a pedigree for your rabbits helps as far as knowing, if you look down the line, you know, on some of mine, there was lion heads that'll be joining us. I personally don't care for red-eyed whites, and the breeder was, you know, she messaged me and she was excited and she was like, oh, she threw a red-eyed white. And I said, how far back is that red-eyed white in that pedigree? Well, 3rd gen had red-eyed white, so I know that is a possibility. That is a carrier. Had she not bred, this was her second kindling, had she not done that, she would not know that that was going to be thrown out. So that's just a good thing to know. These squares, these Punnett squares, I did it very simple, keeping it very basic for you. All the genes and patterns we have talked about is a full Punnett square. We're not ready to talk about that today. By the end of this, we will be. We'll be ready to do the big Punnett square. We'll be ready to talk about patterns and types and this and that. You guys can throw your rabbits down in the comments. We can talk and discuss what is the likelihood of what will come from that. It'll create a buzz. You can get excited about it, especially if you're wanting to save pelts. That will be huge, so that you can see possibly what you could get if you want to, you know, try to get these cool pelts and you think, oh, I can combine these rabbits, I'm going to get a cool pelt. But if you don't understand the genetics, you could end up with a black rabbit. So let's look at Punnett square number 2. Okay, so down here you notice we've got one parent who is homeozygous, and the other parent is heterozygous. So you've got an AA, you've got an A and a recessive, an A and a recessive, and an AA. So that shows you what? That 50% and 50%. So it can literally go either way when you end up having those super strong dominant genes. Chances are when you have your AA, I mean, that's just, you're going to get your agouti rabbit. But that just shows you how simple or how complex that it could get. What that means when you have an AA is that's going to be a double dominant agouti. That's going to be an agouti carrying agouti. When you have that A dominant and the A recessive, that's going to give you an agouti carrying self. Because if you recall from our last diagram, there was 3 levels in our A column: our agouti, our tan otter, and our self. And that recessive agouti is the self. So that could go either way. Now, I know I have tossed a ton of information at you today. This was just, let's dabble into various things so that you can see where we're going, where we could go, get excited, have questions. I have a lot of things planned for this series. I'm not seeing a lot of people go over rabbit genetics. I want to be able to bring that here to our Instagram, to our Facebook. We can spark up conversation in the comments here or either on any of those platforms as well. I would love to see your rabbits. I'd like to know what you're doing with your rabbits. For us personally, it is to be able to provide quality rabbits to others, as well as show quality animals breeding to the standard of perfection, which is what we have here in this book, The Standard of Perfection, that is put out by ARBA, and you can get this and be a registered member. This goes over everything that you would need, and all of their recognized breeds. For example, it shows you, this is a cinnamon rabbit, what they're looking for, what you should be seeing. I know lots of people say, well, I'm just breeding for meat. Yes, but if you do breed to the standards, even if you cross, you're breeding the best of the best, and you're going to get greater density for that as well. We do cross. We've crossed by request for Lionhead New Zealand cross, and there's actually a little girl working on that. She got our rabbits from that, and she's working on that with her own money. And then we also do cross New Zealand and Flemish. Does give a little bit of a bigger pelt. We're not having issues with grow out. I like them. The New Zealands are a little bit spacey, sketchy. The Flemish are a little bit more laid back, so that does give me the temperament that I'm looking for. So it's not that we don't cross, it's just that we trying to be intentional. You wouldn't want to be doing it regularly or just be sending out a ton of pets just out there, because then you start to just really muddy things up if you can just give a quality rabbit. We do pedigrees for our rabbits, of course, not the cross, but if we do the cross, their parents are pedigreed. So just some fun things there. I'm going to be mixing in other videos, yes, but this series is a good top priority, so we'll be getting these videos out. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. They won't all take place right here. We had to do this right here today because it is well over 100 degrees. We're in a heat advisory, and I just really didn't want to be moving rabbits in and out and doing this outside and dealing with all of that. Everybody's really trying to lay low in the heat right now. Rabbits don't do good in the heat, and even though ours do fairly well, they're tolerant, I don't need to fiddle with them anymore. If they're in there with their water, they're in there with their fans, and that's just how we left it. But that won't be every single time. We do have babies, so I will definitely have them on the next episode. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I appreciate you spending your time with me and choosing to do this when I know there are so many things that you could be doing. God bless.